The Hard Shoulder on Newstalk.
With Nissan Subscribe and Drive. No deposit, no compromise, no fuss. Find out more at nissan.ie.
Right now, though, I want to talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of the media tycoon Robert Maxwell. Her trial begins today. She's accused of facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's crimes by recruiting and grooming a number of young women, and in some cases participating in the abuse with the now deceased financier Epstein. John Sweeney is a journalist and he's a reporter on the Hunting Ghislaine podcast. John, you're very welcome back to The Hard Shoulder. It's good to talk to you. Again, can you remind us of the background of this case for people who know little about it?
So there was a horrible man called Jeffrey Epstein who was a multimillionaire and a paedophile, and he abused girls or young women, 14, 15, 16-year-old on a kind of an industrial basis. And his one-time lover, Ghislaine Maxwell, is accused by the by the FBI and the federal prosecutors in New York of essentially assisting Epstein and his perversion. And she now faces, if she's convicted on all charges, 80 years in jail. So she's in a fight for her life. And the striking thing about Ghislaine is that her father was Robert Maxwell, who was the Daily Mirror owner, who fell off the back of his yachts, called the Lady Ghislaine after his youngest daughter and the child he loved the most. And the story is, in a sense, there are so many tragedies. There are tragedies of all these young American girls who lived in trailer parks, who were very, very poor, and they were horribly exploited by Epstein. There is an earlier tragedy in that Robert Maxwell himself was a horrible man and was a monster. And there is strong evidence that he certainly psychologically and emotionally abused all of his children, including Ghislaine. And yet Ghislaine was kind of in love with him. And when he died, most people think, and as I do, that he committed suicide because he was about to be disgraced because he was stealing money from his pensioners because he'd made a terrible bet on some American companies that had gone horribly wrong. But when he died in 1991, Ghislaine Maxwell lost one monster, went to the United States, went to New York and found a second. So there is sort of tragedy wrapped in tragedy. And some of this is going to come out in court. Not all though, Kieran, not all.
I'm glad you make that point about the amount of tragedy involved, because there's a kind of a prurient fascination with this case, and there has been since the story first broke and Jeffrey Epstein was first arrested. And partly it's because of the names involved. Prince Andrew, of course, but the Clintons as well. I mean, what type of detail are we likely to learn about Jeffrey Epstein and his behaviour, and the behaviour possibly of some of his friends and business partners as well? So
Trump, the former president, the former guy, is also kind of hooked up in this, but there's no evidence at all that either Clinton or Trump slept with or had sex with these underage girls. That was Epstein's thing. There's quite a lot of evidence that Epstein provided an atmosphere, an environment in which men, rich men, powerful men, could have sex with beautiful women, models from catalogs, that kind of thing, which of course would be embarrassing for people like Clinton. He'd been president, but Hillary would not approve. But there's some evidence that Epstein provided this environment. But the darker stuff is this industrial abuse of very young 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. And we're going to hear, basically, the federal prosecutors, as I understand it, have got 4 witnesses. And they are women who were very young then, 14, 15, 16, as I say, 17, who will say that they were sexually abused by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, what the defense is going to do is to rip these witnesses to shreds as best they can. So you'll remember essentially that OJ, who was accused of murdering his wife and her lover, got off essentially because the policeman who arrested them, OJ, and led the investigation, had neo-Nazi sympathies, and this completely destroyed the prosecution's case. So what Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers are going to do is try and rip the witnesses to shreds. However, there's strong circumstantial evidence. Now, what happened was that Epstein had 4 homes, one in Manhattan, one in Palm Beach, just down the road from Donald Trump's, one in a massive ranch in New Mexico in the middle of nowhere, and an island, Little St. Jeff's in the US Virgin Islands. And there's evidence, so all the time, Epstein and Ghislaine and these young women, very young women, are flying. Every now and then, Prince Andrew's on the plane. Every now and then, it's said Clinton's on the plane. And all concerned deny any wrongdoing. But the circumstantial evidence is strong. There's a moment in 2005 when the Palm Beach Police Department raid Epstein's home on Palm Beach, and all of the hard drives have gone. And that makes one think that actually somebody tipped off Epstein so that he thwarted the intention of the police raid. Having said that, Kieran, the people who were trying to hoover the place up missed something. They missed a notepad, which was basically a thing on paper. The young girls who were being used almost like in a factory to please or pleasure Epstein would phone in messages, and they would be written down by hand. And some of these messages are completely damning. Would 2:30 be okay because that's the first time she's off school? So the evidence is circumstantial, and it's going to boil down to, this is what Ghislaine Maxwell says, this is what one of these girls, who's now a grown woman, obviously, but with the passage of time, but this is what they say. And then there's the circumstantial evidence. So it's going to be a pretty grimly fascinating court case. And at the heart of it is a kind of a world which, well, if you listen to my podcast, Hunting Ghislaine, you'll get the flavor of it, which I see as being pretty horrible, where these people with enormous amounts of money abuse the poor and the not well connected in a horrible way. And maybe, just maybe, I might be wrong about this, these victims might get some sense of closure.
And you made the comparison to the O.J. Simpson trial. Of course, that was a trial that the world tuned in to watch every day. Will this be televised, this trial? Is it happening behind closed doors? What's the procedure?
It's O.J.'s trial was Californian state, and you can televise trials in the state of California. Federal trials by law cannot be televised. So I'm hoping the COVID variant permitting to go to New York and at least report on the trial for a week. And I've been told by the New York court authorities, as a reporter, I can get into the courtroom, but probably because of the press, because of the massive interest in the story, it's only going to be New York reporters who will be allowed into the court case proper, but there'll be annexes where people like me can go and watch what's happening on a live feed, but it won't be televised. But it is in open court in the old-fashioned way, Kieran. So some kind of justice will be done. But remember, Ghislaine Maxwell has a lot of money. The FBI estimated that when they arrested her, she had something like $20 million. So that money is going to be used. And what you've got some of the time is a situation where people say money can buy justice. We'll see.
Well, listen, John, if you're agreeable, we will catch up with you maybe as the trial progresses. John Sweeney is a journalist and reporter, and his podcast is called Hunting Ghislaine. And if you want to find out all about the background and the details to this, I highly recommend it. It is a great listen, if not a grim listen, to use John's own words. John Sweeney, thanks a million for joining us here on the Hard Shoulder.